Good afternoon, or good morning. How you folks doing? Well, it's good to see some familiar faces and some new faces. So welcome to the Sankofa Primetime. I just learned what Primetime was myself, but Primetime is a collaborative venture between departments and the library where folks kind of get together and share the work that's being done by the departments here on campus and in the neighborhood. So if you missed this event, or if someone wants to be here and they're not going to be here, you can find that the prime times will be on the library's webpage and the calendar events page. So the next one will be Tuesday, April 29th, and it'll be Dr. Jeff Jacobs from the Business and Economics Department. He'll be presenting on the role of institutions, openness, and democracy for economic growth. So today's prime time is Sankofa. Literally, there's a bird, and the bird has its head pointing backwards with an egg in it, and it means looking back to move forward. And so you're going to get an opportunity to hear from students and some faculty and staff who went on this event and how it kind of changed their lives. This is a collaborative between campus ministries, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, Intercultural Student Programs, and the Frogtown Summit University Partnership. So kind of sit back and be open to what you're going to hear. Thank you.
To begin this morning, I'm going to show a short video from this year's trip. I had this figured out a minute ago. There we go. And then after that, I'm going to show a few photos and talk a little bit about Sankofa Global, kind of the big picture. So you can see from that short video there that there are a lot of different pieces to Sankofa. When we start talking about how do you communicate what this trip is to people, it becomes difficult. But I thought that video kind of embodied a few different aspects. For us, there's really these four pieces of the Sankofa journey. One, the historical sites that we visit. Two, historical leaders that we have conversations with. Community building, and then collective action. So some of the historical sites that we visit, these top two photos are from 16th Street Baptist Church. It was one of the cornerstone churches of the Civil Rights Movement. A lot of organizing and mobilization happened out of this church. It's also a church where there was a bombing on a Sunday morning. See where the van is, that car is? Pretty much right across the street, but those windows there by the car is where a bomb was set off on a Sunday morning. And 4 children were killed in Sunday school. So that's one of the, we worship at this church. It's still, it's not a historical site now, but it's a church that's still doing work in the community. And then we also, another historical site that we visit is the Rosa Parks Museum in Montgomery. This sign right here marks the location where Rosa Parks was arrested as she protested bus segregation. So these are some of the key points. We visit several other historical sites, but visiting these locations is a big part of the trip. Also for us, having conversations with those who actually did the organizing and the leading of the movement. So here we have Reverend Robert Gretz and then Jeannie Gretz. They were pastors of the church that Rosa Parks was a member of. So they tell us the story of the Montgomery bus boycott, working with Dr. King and how they organized that bus boycott. Also, if you look at the photo from today's photo of the publicity of this event, Dr. Bradley is in the center of that photo. She's one of the other leaders that we meet with on the trip. But for us, this isn't just about learning history. It's also about having conversations and building relationships with one another. This is a really sacred photo for me. This was about, this is in a Waffle House at about maybe 12 o'clock at night. And we're having some conversations and dialogue with one another. And you can see on the people's faces there that we're starting to know each other. Building loving, connected relationships is a big part of this trip for us. And then out of those relationships, we talk about collective action. We're not just learning history and building relationships, but we're learning history, building relationships to build a better future for all of us. And so here's some photos from Highlander towards the end of the trip, where we sit in circles, we talk about our lives, we talk about what we've learned, we do some strategizing, we meet around campfires, tell some more stories, and then dream about what does it mean for us to live in this world, and to really address these serious social inequalities that we have, particularly the inequalities that we see around race. So here's a photo, again, a Highlander of our whole group. So this morning you're going to get a chance to hear from Shia, Kiersti, and Zach, and then also Justin. Shia is going to share about trauma, healing, and reconciliation. Kiersti is going to talk about privilege and responsibility. Zach is then going to talk about the impact of Sankofa on students. And then Justin is going to share a poem that he wrote on the trip. After Justin shares his poem, then Sean's going to come up and we're going to do some Q&A. So please bring those questions. We want to have some dialogue towards the end of our time. So she is now going to come and share.
Hello. Hi. I don't got much time here, but just want to tell some stories in terms of trauma, particularly being at Bethel. I think one of the first memory I have of Bethel when I came, it was a new student welcome. I was coming to the door to CLC, I think the south entrance, and I was walking. I got dropped off by my friend. And I walked in, and there's just, a bunch of people on both sides of the wall. And as I looked in and walked in, it's just all white faces. And I was just like, okay, this is new. And I was a little apprehensive, but then I realized they're all just looking at me. They didn't say hi. They didn't say, what's your name? Just looking at me. And I walked slowly to the register to register my name, whatever my name tag. And I think, and that memory just stuck in my head. And whether that's intentional, I mean, they could be looking, I'm a handsome guy, I think, but that kind of deal, like, you don't think much of that, you don't, and I didn't think much of that. And then I realized, wow, like that was one of like the moments I felt like I don't belong here. I don't feel welcome. I don't feel like I'm accepted, even just with nothing being said. And then here's another story. Me and some of my Hmong friends, we were walking our lady friend to Getch from Nelson, because we were hanging out, talking. It's probably like 11 or 12 midnight, and we're walking her to the dorm, and we see these other guys. These guys are from our stairwell, along with the RA, and they're like running around Getch with this kind of head or doll on a stick and kind of pranking people's windows, trying to scare them, whatever. And then so we're dropping her off, and then, you know, we're just kind of standing there talking a little bit. You know, we're about to leave, and then security pulled up. I was like, we got called disturbance. Do you know anything about this? Do you have to deal with this? We're like, no, we didn't do nothing. We're just dropping off our friend. We see some guys. They're running over there. They might be the one, you know, the people who were disturbing. And so the guy just said, okay. So and he waited for us to leave. So we walked across the bridge. And then as we were walking towards Nelson, he kind of just drove into that kind of that, you know, asphalt area and watched as we walked in. And I was just, and these other guys they were already running, you know. And then at that point I realized, wow, like, you don't even believe me. You don't believe, like, there's our race have to do with this, you know, that we are. First of all, they asked us if we were students, and we're like, yeah, we're students, you know. Maybe not your typical fellow students, but yeah, I felt really, I was traumatized. I felt demeaned. I felt, again, like the confirmation that I did not belong here. So what those kind of experiences, they create barriers. And as I go through these classes of reconciliation and read books from D. Young, and these barriers of I'm not, you know, not trusting anybody, feeling uncomfortable, feeling unsafe, feeling like I have to always reflect the dominant culture, that I have to speak in a certain way. I can't speak Ebonics. I have to address white people in a proper way. And I feel like I was losing part of myself. And so a lot of that turns into hostility. That turns into a lot of, okay, I don't want to lose part of myself, lose myself, so I'm going to go about this in a certain way. So I'm going to exclude myself, isolate myself with people who are like-minded, who are like myself, who are going to nurture me through this time. And as I, that's my time, but I realized that there's a season for everything, you know. And during the past 2 years, there was a season for me to kind of step away and take time for myself with people that have gone through the same things and be nurtured. Yet also realizing that you shouldn't stay there too long, you know. And I realized that how much I was just leaving behind or leaving on the table, all the relationships, all the time, all the friendships that I could have made. And so this year was kind of my last year in which I was like, hey, I need to overcome my fear. I need to overcome this in order to heal. And so I think in order to move forward reconciliation and healing is first to acknowledge that these kind of things have been done to myself, from others and from myself. And this is through just sharing stories. I love sharing stories, sharing each other, knowing and seeing each other and calling you by name and remembering stories and experiences, you know. That's what makes me feel like I'm accepted, feel like I'm human, feel like I am remembered, that I am worth something. And so, yeah, and so I think healing kind of go hand in hand with reconciliation. Is that when as you pursue to reconcile with each other, you know, in terms of process of dialogues or learning, whatever it is, being community, we also engage in this healing of our past and our present, and all those memories that we have repressed, that I have repressed, that I feel like, oh yeah, they were no big deal. but they were, they are. And so, yeah, that's just a little more story, and I hope that, I don't know, you take something away from that. Thank you.
Well, like Tanden said, my name's Kiersti. I went on Sankofa. I'm a reconciliation and social work major here. I'm going to talk a little bit about privilege and responsibility with that, and kind of just my experience as being a white student on Sankofa. Dictionary.com defines privilege as a right, an immunity, or a benefit enjoyed by only a person beyond the advantages of most. Privilege is a term often used, yet less often understood and faced. This year on Sankofa, this term was brought to attention and deeply discussed. It's a term that has become central in my vocabulary, yet it's something that I continue to learn more and more about. It's been a difficult reality to face, yet it has been one of the most eye-opening words to ever enter my ears and reach all the way to the depths of my heart. As difficult as it is to admit, I live a life of extreme privilege. As the definition states, I have rights, immunity, and benefits that I personally hold beyond the advantages of most. I am a white, middle-class American Christian, continuing to benefit from society's systemic racial inequalities. I live with generations of supremacy and superiority entangled in my genes, and I'm continuing to fight the years and years of entitlement and I know what's right mindsets that have been so ingrained in our culture today. I grew up in Richfield and graduated from a diverse high school that has a demographic of about 30% white students, and then the remaining 70% are students of color. I would consider myself to be someone who is deeply, deeply passionate about issues of inequality and injustice, which makes it that much easier for me to think that I can point the finger at others that I think continue to perpetuate this cycle of racial injustice. But I would be lying to myself if I didn't point the finger at myself first, because I too continue to perpetuate this cycle as I live with privilege and I benefit from the many things at the expense of others. The white, economically stable Americans typically benefit from society's construction the most, and many of us continue to hold most of the power in structural systems today. The problem is that we as white people tend to think that racial issues are things of the past rather than things that continue to live on today. Yes, I want to acknowledge the progress that we've made since Jim Crow laws and the many signs that specified the correct water fountain to drink from and the appropriate seat to sit on a bus. Yet to pretend that racial inequalities and injustice do not continue to affect the marginalized and oppressed today, we would be stopping the notion of bringing the kingdom to earth in its tracks. On Sankofa, as we traveled back through the major sites of the American struggle for civil rights, this truth became that much more evident to me. I heard story after story of the many white citizens that took countless blows, both figuratively and literal blows, of hate-filled, dehumanizing disrespect that stripped the dignity and humanity directly from God's created, beautiful, beloved people. As I sat in the discomfort of realizing people I identify with inflicted so much pain, suffering, and hurt, I couldn't help but want to run in the opposite direction of the truth. These are things that I had been aware of before, yet to walk on sacred ground that shared footsteps with my brothers and sisters that stood in the gap and risked their lives to fight for freedom made me realize how important it is to face these truths in order to move forward. Many times we want to detach from words like racism, inequality, diversity, and reconciliation because we feel that there is shame and blame involved. But that's not true. Yes, I myself was not there with my own hands holding signs that said America for whites only. And I did not play a direct role in the injustice that separated so many human beings. I myself cannot directly be blamed, but where the problem begins is if I am unwilling to look at injustice and inequality that exists today in the face and embrace the responsibility that I have to do something about it. It's about our moment from passivity to action. White Americans need to come to the understanding of racism and develop a commitment to take positive action. White passivity is one of the major roadblocks to achieving racial equality today. One of my absolute heroes is a man named Desmond Tutu, an archbishop that was influential in South Africa's anti-apartheid struggle. He has a quote that illustrates this so beautifully. If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. The fact that I can agree and identify with statements such as white privilege is having your own words and actions attributed to you as an individual rather than have them reflect members of your race. White privilege is being pulled over or taken aside and knowing that you are not being singled out because of your race or color. White privilege is being able to talk about racism without appearing self-serving. And finally, white privilege is being able to fight racism one day and then ignore it the next. These are few of many truths. But my job and our job is first to be open, to become aware, to throw passivity out the window, to engage and build relationships with people that may be different than us, and to live out Christ's call on our lives to see and love one another for who we are created to be. It's not about us having solutions and answers. It's about refusing to be complacent. It's about me standing in solidarity with others and empowering their voices that need to be recognized and heard. When we can allow this to fully happen, we will have created one big, beautiful, beloved community. I'm going to set my timer now. I'm not going over 5 minutes, I promise. So my name is Zach, and I was asked to reflect on how this trip impacts students and equips them to take social action and social change. So throughout this journey, I've been learning the power of questioning and asking good questions that facilitate thought and make you reflect on your own personal experiences. So the huge question is how this trip impacted myself, those around me, and then what is the aftermath. And I believe in challenges. So I'm challenging you all after you've heard power and privilege and what they've gone through, what Shia has gone through. Instead of listening and just thinking about it, I challenge you to listen to the questions I'm going to ask you, take something away with it, and then react and take action. So the first thing that Sankofa has taught all of us is it's given us knowledge. But the question is, what will you do with it? Will you take it in and listen? Or will you forget that it exists because it conflicts with your everyday reality? Or will you find a friend, talk about it, and make some changes? The first part is realizing that the problem exists. You have to ask yourself, who does it affect? Why does it affect us? What system is in place that needs social change? Is that at Bethel? Is it systemic? Is it in the job? Sankofa really got to the nitty-gritty of the church. We need to remind ourselves that every Sunday the most segregated place for Christians is in the church. And to think that that exists in our own religious denominations is scary. That's not just a racial thing. That's a Christ thing. Christ called for unity and togetherness. Our word for Sankofa is Ubuntu. I am because we are. If we are divided on Sunday, what does that say about our society? That was question number 3. My question to myself after this trip was, after you know, do you sit? How can you sit?
Keeping quiet sides with the oppressor. You've heard stories from Shia, you've heard experiences from Kiersti. After hearing their experiences, how do you sit without saying something? Can you listen to an experience of someone who's been marginalized by Bethel security and is now a senior, and this is probably one of the first times he's ever shared that story? Can you sit there without addressing that problem and making sure that it never happens to anyone else again? Can you listen to someone pour out their spirit about power and privilege and racial inequality without joining the wagon and thinking about how I can change this campus for the better? Question number 4. I think the overarching question that all students are asking themselves now is, how can I make a difference? You've heard everything, we've gone on Sankofa. It's huge. You get messages left and right, and you're wondering, I'm just a student. What do I do? How do I move forward? It starts with questions and conversations. It starts with boldness and being able to realize that the problem exists on this campus. The problem exists in your friend groups, in your dorms. It exists right here. Instead of pretending that it's outside, start with the source. This is where you can affect. You are a student right now. Let's not pretend like we can go outside and completely change the world in a day. You can start changing Bethel from today until May 21st when you leave. Start with change today at Bethel. The last thing that I want to drop, little shameless plug, is how you can get involved on the social change wagon. Right now, if you're thinking I'm lost, I don't know where to go, how do I connect with these people? United Cultures of Bethel is the first stop. There are people here who want to talk about social change, people who want to see Bethel be Ubuntu. But it's a vision and it's a goal, and it's not something that you can just talk about. It's something that you have to walk into, ready, open, willing to pursue. All of this goes nowhere if we're not ready and open and willing to pursue the vision. If the vision for Bethel is Ubuntu and living together in a harmonious, beloved community, then it's time for us to start today.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Justin Wulf. Before I start my poem, I just wanted to say something for you guys to kind of think about. The year 1619, the very first African slave ship was transported to America. 345 years later, 1964, the Civil Rights Act was passed, and only 50 years, that's a seventh of the time that there have been slaves in oppression. Only 50 years there has been a law in effect in America that said no more discrimination, segregation. Ever since the first slave ship arrived on American land, 345 years have passed of oppression, the physical and mental conditions to suppress a civil rights movement against the distribution of power, unjust government officials, fire hoses, German shepherds and pistols. How can America be so ignorant to profile the Middle East when we bomb for little girls on 16th Street? Dr. King's four walls also came crashing down for Molotov cocktails running around town. The hatred we face disgrace the human race. It's time we stand up and occupy a space to collaborate, start an organization, come together for affirmative action and make change. If it's us that we're waiting for, then what are we waiting for? It's time we made change.
All right, can we get our three speakers to come up and stand over here? We're going to now do some Q&A, and so if you have questions, the four of us will do our best to address those questions for you. So, are there questions out there? That seems. Oh, there we go.
Well, for Shia personally, can you talk about the healing process? What are steps that you have taken beyond having conversations with people and making that choice of reaching out to people who you haven't had a chance to because your process has been too much?
So you're saying what other steps have I taken besides just conversations? I think another part is also, I think, is a constant journey of understanding and knowing who you are. And so as I go through these conversations and this journey of dialoguing with people, I also dialogue with myself and with God, and understanding, okay, who is Jonathan Shia Yang, you know, and what am I going to be about, and how has God put these different experiences in my life for me to work with and work from. And so, and I've gone through a lot of things, and so that's what kind of step I feel like I gotta get to know myself even more in order for healing, and also for reconciliation in terms of dealing with other people.
We've got a question here, and then one in the back.
Maybe it's a question and a challenge. As the office, working with Tanden, that has put forth Sankofa, I think every year one of the biggest challenges that we see is inviting non-people of color, particularly white males, to engage in this story. Because I think that there's still a fear of the story, as if it's going to be a black and white story where the white folks are going to be the villains and the folk of color are going to be the justified. How would you encourage, particularly non-white or white students who are males, and particularly to engage on this? What would be the benefit to get white males, particularly who are the smallest group that ever go on this trip, to be on Sankofa? What would be the benefit? And how can we encourage them to be a part of it?
You three can answer, but let me take a shot at this. For myself, I think that you can only give what you have inside. So we all have this gas tank, and depending upon what type of gas you put in it, that fuels the machinery. For myself, as a follower of Jesus, I am told that I should go and preach the gospel to all the nations. That word used there is ethnos, which means all the ethnic groups. And then I'm told that in John that we are to be one in one accord. And so for me, the idea of Sankofa is not just a Afrocentric or an Asiatic or a Hispanic, but it is an all people group. What does it mean to look back then to move forward? And so how can I truly look back without my sisters and all my brothers with me looking back and then moving forward? Because I can't exclude you when you live right next to me. And so for me, the idea, how do we invite other folks in? We don't invite them into a shame and blame circle, but we invite them into a reconciliation circle, which we understand that is filled with Christ, because Christ is the agent of reconciliation. So for me, the foundation for why do we do this work is based upon a biblical notion that all tribes, all tongues, and all nations will stand before the throne worshiping God in white. And so for me, Ubuntu, I am because we are, I am because we are, because all of us are there. And so I would take that it is not a them and us, but it is how do we, as followers of Christ, engage in this.
My answer to that would be, you have to get the whole story. So speaking to a white male, I would probably say, most of your life you have heard one side of the story. You've heard the side of privilege. You've heard the side of the oppressor, because that's the society that you've been born into. However, this trip gives you the opportunity to hear the other side. And of course it's going to be a hard journey. I'm sure most of the white students who went on this trip probably walked in going, they're just going to blame me. They're going to blame me, and I'm going to walk out and I'm going to feel defeated. But when you enter in the community of Ubuntu together, you start to reconcile and put those pieces back together. And you can't change what your ancestors did, but that doesn't mean you have to be the oppressor today. You have the opportunity to change what other people did by stepping into that spot and learning and getting the other side of the story so you can better educate your children and the people in your community so that you never have to feel like the blame is on you. You were given privilege. You can't change that. That's just the way you were born. The system is not easily broken, but you can help change the system by working within the system.
Just want to say something real quick. Something that was written in the Clarion, Dr. Rivera wrote, said is if you're a Christian, then you're a reconciler. And so I always appeal to that. You know, and sometimes I'm just baffled that not enough Christians are putting this as a priority in terms of knowing each other's history, knowing each other's stories, and moving that process of reconciling with each other. So, yeah.
I would say too, just being a white student and engaging in this, it is scary just to even Kayla and I talk a lot about this in Peacemakers of just the reality of the people that I identify with have hurt so many people historically, not just in America, but you know, places all over the world. And it's scary, but it's reality, and we can't act out of fear and live in fear of that, because it's not about us. It's about just bringing, I think, Christ's mission of seeing people united in things that are bigger than us. And it's scary, but we talk about a word too, Sabona. We talked about that a lot on Sankofa, and it means I see you in your full humanity. And just the depth and the richness of that phrase of I see you in your full humanity, that doesn't just go for the students of color on the trip, or, you know, I expect to be seen in my full humanity too, because I am a child of God, and that's just the reality of this whole deal. So as we can all see each other for each other in their humanity, it gets that much easier to just engage in the realities that we face today. So
we had a question here, and then there was one over here also. So yes.
Actually, this is more of a comment. I've been on Sankofa, and I really loved the experience. The thing that I noticed though is that, and I think one of to help answer this question that you had asked, Pastor had asked, is the inclusion in Sankofa. There is plenty of inclusion of white folks that laid it on the line at the time, okay, and even before, to empower white folks to see that they're part of the good side of the story too. So in other words, it isn't just, you know, the ancestors who did all this terrible stuff, because when you do something like this, the fact of the matter is, in that history, there's a lot of white folks who aren't going to be the heroes of the story. But there are plenty of people, whether in all of the Americas, whether we're talking about people, you know, like Spanish folks like Bartolomé de las Casas, or the English, you know, William Wilberforce. I mean, there are stories like this that inspire and empower. That should be a very strong part of this process, because then there are models that encourage and inspire, and as opposed to just a person can feel overwhelmed, you know, of just kind of the people that, you know, when black folks and white people were marching for racial justice, and other white folks stole their flags and hosed them down and chased them with dogs, you know. So I think that's a very powerful component, including, you know, other heroes. That there were lots of folks. There were Jews. There were other kinds of folks that stood up against these kinds of injustice. So that's just a recommendation.
Okay, and then one more question here. Are we running down with time, Tanden?
Yeah, a couple more minutes.
Okay, so we'll have one more question. Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about how you prepared for the trip, and then one thing that happened that you didn't feel prepared for that surprised you during the trip?
I actually got on the trip like 3 days before we left, which was just the biggest blessing that I could have ever imagined. And I think that was kind of actually nice for me, because I think I went in with absolutely no expectations and just came in with an open heart and an open mind and open ears. And this is stuff that I'm studying, and I was ready to fully engage in that. I think I was surprised by the resilience in the stories. I just like was overwhelmed with how people could take so much pain and people just inflicting so much pain, yet just be so beautifully resilient and do it in, like, man, the most impressive way of just like the non-violence and how much of an impact and how faith was so core to that, and how people like really took care of one another, and that idea of Ubuntu, I am because we are. And I spent some time in South Africa last year, and that concept is fully lived out, and I feel like I got a glimpse into like the way that people just needed one another just throughout the whole civil rights movement. And I was blown away by how persistent in really just in incredible ways, and I feel like that's something we don't focus on as much, of just the story of the ways that people they stood in the gap and they stayed there and they didn't move. And that's just, I think, been the biggest conviction and call for me, is just gotta stay standing.
This is my second time going on Sankofa. The first time as a student intern / leader. I think just a lot of dialogue with other people coming in, before going to the trip. Just had like, a little nervous about how things are going to be, especially without Leon and different things, and kind of try to compare my experience from before, but realized that I should just trust in God, and whatever whatever comes out of this trip is going to be good, and so. And it has been like that. And I think the most surprising thing that I've taken from this trip is just the kind of community, and kind of just usually after a trip, people go out and do their own thing, whatever. But I'm so surprised. I'm so blessed that people just kept getting connected together. Hey, let's do a potluck. Hey, let's meet together. Let's plan. Let's continue to be in dialogue. Let's hang out. And so I'm just been blessed with that, and so yeah.
Question is planning.
How did you prepare?
Okay. I can honestly say now, I wasn't prepared for this trip. I was not prepared. After the retreat, I said to my roommate, I was like, I gotta get out of this. I don't know how I'm gonna do this. I was ready to go, but I can honestly say, conversation was the best thing that I could have done. I am an internal processor. I don't like talking to people about my feelings. It doesn't help me. But it's starting to help now. I'm learning that having people bounce ideas back and forth with you is the best way to just flush things out. And the one thing that surprised me the most was there are successful black professionals out there, and they're my age, and they work and have the same passions that I have, and they may not be on TV every day, but they're out there, and it gives me something to look forward to, that when I get out of here, the world's got to watch out, because now I have a role model. It's not just a Rosa Parks or an MLK. It's an Evo Longoria.
I'm going to have Kiersti pull out the name for our book. As she's doing that, I want to highlight a couple things. Kiersti did get added to the trip just before, but one of the things that we do to prepare people is community building, relationship. We break everyone into small groups. And for her, she came down to my office with Connor and a couple other people who were on the trip saying, hey, here's someone that we know and we'd like to have her on the trip. So there was some relationship that was already connected there, and that's for us. We can have some head knowledge and some knowledge of the civil rights movement, but if you don't know one another, that fear that Zach talked about will really push you away. Mm-hmm. But community allows us to face those fears. The book that we're going to give away today is called Hands on the Freedom Plow, Personal Accounts of Women in SNCC. Some really, really powerful stories and powerful women who talk about their experience in the civil rights movement. So, Kiersti, who's the person who...
Justin.
I would like to redonate it back into the thing. I did my secret fold. I told Anthony about it, and so yeah.
Johnny.
We We are going to give this away to a person who didn't go on the trip. Or at least someone who didn't present.
She's gone. Anna.
Oh,
Oh.
Okay, we're not actually pulling anyone person who's here.
Kayla.
Thanks again for everyone for coming. If you're interested in the trip, come talk to Sean or I, and we'd love to have more dialogue with you.